Morning, everybody. Welcome back to the live feed here at Go On Assembly. Glad to have you back. It is the 15th of June, 2025, and you know what I'm going to say next, right? Time flies. One thing I'm sure of is this: if you try to build some novelty into your day, into your week, do some things you don't always do. Enjoy taking a breath, spending some time with your family, doing something a little bit different. Your brain stops and starts recording again, and you have some memories, and it slows time down a little bit. So do your best not to have your day be just the mundane drive home from work all the time, and it'll seem to stretch time out a little bit. Really glad to have you back on the feed this morning. A couple of quick good mornings to Rose, Don, Maureen, Aunt Sharon, Sky. Great to have you guys back. As always, leave a comment. We do a drawing each month for a $25 Tim Hortons gift card that we give away. So glad to have you all back. I want to give a thanks to Jim Sanderson, by the way, because he shares this feed on several different channels on Facebook, and I appreciate you getting on there. So as I said, we're going to start today in Psalm chapter 139. But first, we have today, the third Sunday of the month, is our Missions Awareness Sunday. So in church this Sunday, Bill Law will be doing our missions awareness little clip. We have a guest with us today who I'd like to introduce. Let me just go to my screen and share him with you here on the screen. I'd like to introduce Jordan Fluker. He works for Cru, or Campus Crusade for Christ, and we proudly support the ministry that he does here in the city of Buffalo. So I'm actually going to give him the camera, and I'm going to be his slide guy, and I'm going to ask him to share himself some of what he does and some of what we're supporting he and his family doing. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jordan. Go ahead and share with us what you do. All right.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. As Pastor Dave said, my name is Jordan. Married to my wife, Hannah, of going on 4 years, and we have a 1.5-year-old toddler, a little girl named Aurora. Yeah, there she is. She is super sweet. She's adorable. She's also super challenging and sassy at the same time. So what a time to be a parent. So happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I've been a full-time campus missionary with Cru, or Campus Crusade, for the past 5 years. And I work primarily on campuses like University of Buffalo, Buff State, Damon University, and Niagara campuses. And so I've been doing that since I graduated college. I went to UB and studied computer science. Long story short about me, I came to know Christ in college, and through the ministry of Cru, I really began to see my part in God's mission, and I decided when I graduated I wanted to be a missionary. So here we are 5 years later. You might be wondering, why college campuses? Why is that a group to go after with the gospel? Well, it's really strategic, right? You have the world's next leaders on these campuses, the next doctors, the next lawyers, the next teachers, the next politicians, maybe the next pastor, maybe the next missionary. All of these different leaders are flocking to these campuses, and not to mention the amount of international students that come to the U.S. to study at college. So there's a huge missions field, and obviously there's a lot of great ministries out there, but for me, I see this huge need on these college campuses. So as we're looking at this picture, this is from UB. I probably don't have to convince a lot of you the nature or the spiritual climate on college campuses today, but just to recap a little bit, and this is based off of a lot of my experience on these campuses, is our students are very apathetic toward God, apathetic toward Jesus and the gospel. And what I mean by that is the conversation about God's almost irrelevant these days. No one really considers that to be an important conversation. And even amidst that, there's the relativism that, Christianity's one of many different ways out there, but we know the truth of what does Jesus say. He says, I'm the way, the truth, the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. So it's very hard to stand up and say, hey, we have the truth. There is one way on a college campus setting. I experienced a lot of students who grew up in some sort of church environment, or maybe they went to Sunday school or a camp as a kid, but very few of them actually understand the gospel. I meet a lot of students who maybe have a Bible at home, but they probably haven't read it in years. I met a student one time, grew up in church, and we were doing a Bible study together, and we said, hey, let's go to the Gospel of John. And he wasn't exactly sure what the Gospel of John was. And I don't say that as a condemning way, but as a reality check of, hey, our young people, there's a gap here, there's a miss going on. Simply being present at church is not sufficient to actually disciple somebody. They need to actually grow. They need to pour in. We need to disciple our young people, and that's true for me. It's true for all of you guys watching as well. So this ministry crew, we labor alongside the church to help fulfill the Great Commission by reaching our college campuses. So on top of that, if we go to the next slide, you might be wondering, well, what other kinds of groups are on campus? I mean, a campus like UB is huge. There's lots of different clubs and different religious groups there. This is a picture of myself, and I actually met these guys. This was a part of a Muslim evangelistic group on campus. And long story short, these guys are posted up in the student union with their Bibles ready, hoping to engage with some Christian students. The first time I met these guys, I was honestly pretty impressed with their knowledge and a lot of the things they challenged me on in my faith. And it was a difficult conversation, a lot of apologetic type conversations, but they were ready. And the reason why I bring this up is because you think about that. Think about our young Christian students who have a relationship with Jesus. And I think about, man, what happens when they encounter guys like this, right? They were very nice. They were not very confrontational, but they were ready to dismantle the Christian faith. So what does it look like for our young people to engage something like that? I find a huge need, not just for the gospel to go out, but for young Christians to get discipled, to understand some basic apologetics, how to stand firm in their faith so that when they meet guys like this, or when they meet professors that claim that God's not real and science tells us everything, or they meet their roommates of another religion, that they're ready to have those conversations and to actually stand firm in their own faith. So there's a lot of hard ground. These campuses, to use the parable of the sower, there's hard ground, there's thorns. It's a spiritual war zone, but that's why we go into these campuses. So I want to share a little bit about what that looks like on a weekly basis. What is the work that I'm actually doing here? So on the next slide, we talk about winning, building, and sending. And lots of ministries have something similar, but this is the way Cru kind of lays it out. And I agree with it. And it revolves around the Great Commission. So one of the things we're doing is we're winning the campus. And I like to explain it this way: is we're not just a Christian club, but we are a Christian movement trying to conquer the campus spiritually. We want the gospel to go out. We want every student and faculty, staff member to hear the gospel. So what would it look like to reach some hundreds of thousands of students and faculty that are in Buffalo? That's our end goal. That's a big goal. That's a huge ask, but God can do it. And we're just trying to be faithful to that call. So we can go to the next slide. We're doing that through evangelism and outreach on campus. So this is a typical picture at the beginning of the semester at UB. We do a lot of outreach. We try to just cast a wide net to connect with as many students as possible through surveys or giveaway items, things like that, just to make the connection and say, hey, we're a Christian group on this campus. You can connect with us. Here's what we do. And through those conversations, trying to engage with students. So we'll usually get their phone numbers or a way to connect with them, and we'll personally follow up with those students. I think this past fall, with maybe 4 of us going out on campus and walking around and doing surveys, we probably connected with over 1,000 students, and that's just with 4 people. So we're able to cast a wide net in that regard. We also do evangelism. So on the next slide, we'll go out to the campus, just like how I mentioned earlier that there's other groups that are evangelizing on campus. So we will do that as well. So we'll post up on campus. You know, sometimes there I am on the right hand side. They're just holding up a flyer, and this is in one of the student dorm locations. So we're actually trying to get into these buildings as we're able to and engage with students. On the next slide, there's a picture here where we are in the student union, and we have these different conversation tools we'll use, like these banners, for example. Big, bright, colorful, and they just ask some of life's most important questions. What do you believe about God? What do you believe about humanity? What do you believe about Jesus? Some pretty basic questions, but it sparks students' interest, and they'll come over and we'll just engage them in a spiritual conversation, and in many ways it leads to an open door to share the gospel with them. And I think we have one more slide after that. This is an event we did during Easter. So obviously Easter, a lot of conversations are going around about church and about Jesus in general. So we'll usually try to do some sort of public Q&A or some sort of engagement with the students where they can come and just ask their questions. Whether they're not Christian or Christian, students have a lot of questions about the Bible, about God. And so we had some local pastors and Christian leaders come in, and we just had an open Q&A. And just to give you an idea of the questions students are asking, we had one guy, he comes to these events pretty frequently, but he asked a question about, what about animal suffering? All right, if God is real, what about all of these animals in the world that are suffering and all these things, which ultimately we know, if there's no God, who cares about suffering, right? If there's no God, there's no meaning to any of that, right? And we know from the biblical worldview is that humanity was created in the image of God. We're not like the animals. There's a distinction there. But it's just interesting the kind of questions students are going through. And I'll say this is something we can all think about. Sometimes people ask questions not because they want the answer, but because they want to put up a wall in terms of, well, since you can't answer this question, I don't have to deal with the reality of God's existence. I don't have to deal with the reality of the gospel. So keep that in mind when you're talking with people, and maybe you have a friend or family that always has some new question. And that might very well be the case, is that they're not actually trying to really get an answer. They're trying to suppress the truth, right? So that's winning the campus. We're also building into our students. We can go to the next slide. We want to disciple these young people. Obviously, I work with the male students. So this picture here, I'm in the back, and then there's a couple of guys next to me with the cross necklaces. That's Nick and Steven. And so what we'll do is, obviously, we want our students to be in a local church on Sundays, but throughout the rest of the week on campus, we want to get into a small group setting with them and really get into deep Bible study, to talk about missions, to talk about apologetics, talk about their doubts, accountability. We see that pattern throughout Jesus's ministry, right? He reached the crowds, but he focused on a relative small amount of guys, 12 guys, who would then go on to change the world. So in my experience, and I think this is true across the church, the most effective discipleship happens when we get into those small group settings, whether it's a one-on-one, like a mentorship, or a group of 3. So that's what we try to do with our students. And Stephen and Nick here, I had the opportunity to just sit down with them and just lay a groundwork of, first of all, what is the gospel? A lot of times we can look past that, like, hey, how do you know Jesus? When did you become a Christian? How do you even do that? Laying that foundation there. And then once that's established, talking about, hey, how do we wrestle with sin? If I'm a follower of Christ, but I still sin, does God still forgive me? How do I know I can have assurance of my salvation? How do I walk in the power of the Holy Spirit? What's the importance of being in a local church? All of these things is very foundational. And a lot of times our students, at the very least, don't know how to communicate these things. But a lot of times they're like, wow, I never really understood this is what it means to follow Christ. And that was huge in my life too. I'll share a brief testimony. Like I said, I came to faith in Christ in college, but through Cru, I was going to church on Sunday and I had that foundational growth there, but I had a guy on campus, a couple guys actually, who I'd meet with, do Bible study together. And I began to make these connections. I began to see, wow, this is a missions field that I'm on. I'm not just here to be a student to get this degree and, means to an end, but why does God really have me here? This is a missions field. I have a part to play in that. I began to have more confidence in my faith. And I could go on, but that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach young people to obey Christ, right? What does Jesus say? Go make disciples of all nations and teach them to obey all that I have commanded you in every aspect of our lives. I have one more slide here. The next one is a men's Bible study that we do in the dorm room. So, different campuses, there's different dorms, and depending on how public or private the campus is, we can actually go into the dorms. So this is at UB. This is in Griner Hall, if any of you guys are familiar with that. But we go and do these Bible studies with the hope that students would just walk by and say, hey, there's a Bible study happening, right underneath where I live, and having it available to students. Unfortunately, it's very hard to get students to come off campus. Hey, come to church with me. Hey, come do this. We definitely should continue to do that. But in a lot of ways, why this ministry is critical is because we need to go where students are, remove all the possible barriers, because as someone who used to be a student myself, we can come up with a lot of excuses as to not engage with other believers. But these guys here, it was encouraging because a lot of these guys, different levels in their faith. Some of them honestly aren't even believers, But we're just getting into God's word and we're just walking through it chapter by chapter and trying to draw out the meaning of the text. If you like theological terms, we're trying to practice good exegesis, right? How do we actually put the study in Bible study and get these guys to really slow down and read their Bible, prioritizing their own time in the Word, not just relying on Sunday morning to be that only teaching for you. That is important, right? Pastor Dave will tell you that. That is critical, but having our own personal time is especially critical. So we're winning the campus, we're discipling students, and then we're sending them out. On the next slide, I think I have a picture here of Nick. He's one of our student leaders. He was actually just in the last picture with our Bible study. We want to teach students, again, like how I had to realize when I was a college student that I have a part to play in God's mission, whatever that looks like. Whether I'm a missionary vocationally like I do now, or whatever vocation a student goes into, we are called to be witnesses for Christ. And so we want to give students opportunities to go on mission, whether that's short term over a spring break, we do a missions trip, or over the winter break, they can go overseas in some cases, or like this summer, we had a few students, Nick here in the middle included, where he's in Ocean City right now, and he's doing evangelism in a workplace setting for 10 weeks this summer. We're a little bit into that, but he's given 10 weeks of this summer. He could have done an internship. He could have went to work. He could have stayed at home and watched Netflix all day, but he went on mission. Why is that so important? Well, Ocean City specifically has a lot of international students that come there to go to work. So we send students there to spread the gospel to international students. But giving students opportunities to do this. In some cases, they realize, hey, maybe I would consider being a full-time missionary in some other part of the world, maybe a closed country, or just giving students the opportunity to see, hey, wow, I can actually witness for Christ. If I can witness to these strangers on the beach or these strangers on campus, I feel more comfortable in reaching my family. And that's actually true for myself as well. I've grown and I'm still growing in my, witness to my unsaved family members. But that started by in crew learning how to share the gospel and start spiritual conversations. And we want the students to practice this as a lifestyle, right? All of us, this is a lifestyle of a follower of Christ. We need to be ambassadors for Christ. So this is nothing new. But we take this little, usually 4-year chunk of time to really pour into our students so that when they graduate, where the next church leader is going to come from, friends, right? You ever think to yourself, man, we could really use someone to step up and lead this Bible study or step up and lead this outreach opportunity? Well, we want to see students do that. We want to help equip the church by training up these young people while they're away, potentially. They're out of their hometown. They're away from their family. Maybe you have kids who are away from you right now. We want to take them and use that as a training time so that when they come back or when they go out wherever into the world, that they're ready to serve Christ. And all those vocations I talked about, the doctors, the lawyers, the teachers, the engineers, all of those things. So I'll just close with this. We can go to the next slide. There's a picture of the globe, I think. But if I had to sum up this ministry that I do in one sentence, it'd be this: to take a strategic opportunity to reach young adults with the gospel and see them turned into confident disciples of Christ who are grounded in the truth of God's word and who are being equipped to serve Christ in every vocation, like I just talked about. So that's the ministry I do in a nutshell. We can go to the next slide. If any of you guys are thinking, hey, I want to know how to be a part of this ministry or support this, Hannah and I have been doing this, like I said, for 5 years. Our total financial income is all based off of support from churches like Awanda Assembly and other individuals and families who can support this. We need people to pray for us, commit to praying for us. We need people who can support us financially if that's what God calls you to do. But if you want to connect with me for any reason, whether it's support or whether it's, hey, I've got a son or daughter or niece or nephew or grandkid who's going to a campus, could you help me connect them with a ministry? Or if you're local to Buffalo and you want to figure out, hey, how can I help practically? Do you guys need meals? Anything like that, go ahead and scan that QR code and you can enter your information and I'll reach out to you after that. And so I'll leave you with some prayer requests. If you're thinking, how can I be praying for you guys? Pray for college students to see the truth of the gospel, that God would open up their eyes. Pray that young believers would grow to be mature in their faith, that they would stand firm in their faith. And for all of us parents out there, right, I'm the young parent, I'm still getting into this groove, so I'm still learning, but we need to disciple our kids while you have them at home, right? They're becoming young kids and then preteens and teenagers, take that time to disciple them well, go through the Bible with them, specifically teach them to discern the culture. Right? I think it's great um, trying to keep your kids, in your inner circle, protecting them, but we cannot protect them from the world forever. We're in the world, but we're not of the world. Teach our kids how to discern when somebody makes a truth claim. How do we submit that? How do we take that thought captive for Christ? I think will lead us very well, whether they go to college or whether they go into the workforce, whatever it is. Disciple your kids, and I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Really appreciate you making some time, and we'll see you here in the service in about an hour and a half. So
Yeah, thank
thanks
you so much.
again. If you guys wanted to leave a comment as well, Jordan can see the comments as they're coming up on the screen today. But again, thanks. Looking forward to seeing you face to face, Jordan. Thank you very much. All right, how's that? So we have one of our missionaries here to share what's going on in his world. So, all right, I'm going to give you a quick sermon. We planned on doing these both together. So we talked last week about identity, right? Oh, by the way, you can also give to Jordan's mission by going to www.givetogowanda.com, Dropbox missions, and then just put Jordan's name in the memo, and we'll make sure that it gets to him. Okay, so I want you to turn to Psalm chapter 139 if you have your Bible. I'm going to share it with you on the screen as I normally do. And I want to just talk for a minute about how we kind of see the world. And as far as our identity goes, how a whole different little aspect is going to play in, okay? So I want to think about this. Part of our identity, anytime we say I am, we're talking about how we see ourselves and our identity, right? And identity, again, is a key word, a hot button in our society today. So you might say, I am surrounded by friends. I am friendless. I'm left without help. I'm uncared for. Maybe you think I am the most powerful force in my own good, for my own good. These are all identity issues. And so we face struggles and decisions and feelings and perceptions. And what about the presence of God? What is that? Well, the way we see ourselves and identity plays into all of this, okay? Let me give you an illustration. We tend, especially as Westerners, to see ourselves as this independent person, this being, this awareness, and we pull in the things around us to affect that, right? So my coffee, this is actually tea, is a product that I'm going to use. I've got some colored pens I use for my spiral Bible study. My microphones, people around me. I've said often lately that for much of my life, I lived around relationships, but I didn't live out of them. I didn't live as part of a relationship. I didn't live as a dad. I lived with a guy who had a bunch of stuff to do who has kids. But living as a dad who also pastors or is building things, it's a whole different concept. So we tend to treat God the same way. We tend to treat him as this thing outside of us that we use. He's a tool. He's another accessory to some people. He's this thing I have to answer to. He's a piece of my world and who I am. But do we see him for what he really is from an identity standpoint? Okay. I want you to just bring this up. The Lord's Prayer has been on my mind this week. Let me just recite the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts or trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Let's go back to the beginning of the Lord's Prayer and just think of this from an identity standpoint. Our Father, who art or who rules, who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Hallowed be thy name. Let your name, may your name, Lord, be proclaimed as holy, as something different. Is that our heart? Is that what we are doing? Is that what we're saying? Is that how we see him, right? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. I want to just suggest this. If we think of the earth, like in creation, God separated the earth. He separated and created a space where there are three heavens, if you will: the heavens that the birds fly in, the heavens that the stars are in, and the heavens that God himself dwells in. Are we in the heavens? Well, if you think of it as a globe, we're pretty much encased and surrounded by the heavens above. The earth as a planet is surrounded by the heavens that the stars are in. And I would say the presence of God is probably multidimensional, and we are absolutely surrounded by it all the time. I want to change a little bit the way you think of God's presence in your life. Psalm 139, let me share my screen. Psalm 139 says this: Where shall I go from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol or the grave, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. When we read that, he's saying, where can I go from your presence? Does that mean that we are literally in the very presence of God all the time? Yes. Yes, that is what it means. He is actually not far from us. Let's go to one of my favorite chapters. You guys have heard me talk about this one all the time. Acts chapter 17. I'm going to go to verse 26, and this is where I usually start. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being, even some of your own poets have said, for we indeed are his offspring. Paul is likely quoting a poet in that time frame in Athens, Greece. Paul is saying that he is actually not far from all of us, for in him we live and move and have our being. 2 Corinthians, Paul's thorn in the flesh story. I just want to remind you of that, because Paul says, I have a thorn in the flesh. I have this battle. In fact, it's a messenger of Satan sent to buffet my life. It's a trial, a struggle. Certainly God would want to rescue me from this demonic attack on my life. And God says, my grace is sufficient for you, for in your weakness is my strength made perfect. Let's just stop for a second there. My grace is sufficient for you. I think it makes sense in that moment that we have to say, in order for God's grace to be sufficient for Paul, doesn't his grace have to be present with Paul? And the grace of God is only with you when the presence of God is with you. For in him we live and move and have our being. Where can I go from your presence? So I want to just return briefly to some of the statements I made at the beginning of this mini compressed message. I am surrounded by friends. I'm in a good place. I am left without help. I am hopeless. I am uncared for. I am the most powerful force for good in my life. You are surrounded by the very presence of God. You are surrounded by the heavens that he lives in. I believe it's in Colossians, it says, for all things are held together by the word of his power. Actually, that might be Romans. Anyways, all things are held together by the word of his power. That means your beating heart is held together by the word of his power, by his presence. Your children are in fact held together in the presence of God. And so as a person, I want part of your identity to be this: I am living in the very presence of God. I am never alone. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. How precious are your thoughts toward me, O God, how vast the sum of them. But your identity may be, I am spiritually lost, and he is waiting for me to come to that realization, to call out to him who in fact is not far from me. He's waiting for your voice to call. He is there waiting for you to acknowledge him, to be impacted by him, to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you can prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. I want you to realize that no matter what your struggle is, no matter what you are doing right now, lost as you may feel, and even those around you who you love who don't know him yet, who are not yet believers, God's love and his presence is right here. And the question is, will you live right in the presence of God? Will you hear his voice? Will you heed his word? Will you believe him? Believing in him and believing him are two very different things. He is as present as your own thoughts, and he knows them. Before a word comes to my lips, Lord, you know it fully well. You know the hairs on my head. I want you to know that there isn't a place, as Psalm 139 says, that you can go where he is not there, wanting to be seen and known and heard by you. He wants to fill you with his spirit and give you proof that his spirit is living inside you. Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, kindness, self-control. He wants these things to come alive in you through his very presence in your life. So, identity, anytime you say, I am, I want you to think of the name of God, for I am that I am. He is the greatest being, right? He says, I am, a present tense state of being verb. There isn't a time or place where God is not. And so that brings you peace and me peace, knowing that the very creator of all that is holding your life in his hands, just waiting for you to see him and hear him and engage who he is, that your life can be forever changed. I want you to realize again, you are a human being. He is the greatest, the creator being. And he is today being in your world. Will you acknowledge that in all you do and hold on to that and know his great love for you that can change who you are? As a quick recap of last week, your identity must be grounded in the one who has created you. Find out what he has made, what he intends for it, and you will find life and life abundantly. These college kids on their campuses, God is with them. What does the word, the name Emmanuel means? It means God with us. He has gone to prepare a place for us, that where he is, we may also be. We may also exist. Okay? He knows who you are. And don't forget this question. Anytime you think of something that identifies you that is not what God has called your life to or made your life to be, I want you to hear him asking you the question, who told you you were hopeless? Who told you you were unsavable? Who told you you weren't worth loving? Who told you you're stupid? Who told you you're ugly? Who told you all these things? Because that's not what I made. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You cannot escape my presence, and precious toward you are my thoughts. I sent my son into the world not to condemn it, but that by his death on the cross, the world would be saved and purchased and brought into relationship as a son and daughter. A stinking men to that. All right. Thank you guys again for being here with me this morning. A little bit of a long time, but really wanted to bring Jordan in and let you guys meet him, because he'll be meeting the church family in person today here at Gowan Assembly. If you're in the area, 10 a.m. here at 78 Allen Street in Gowanda. Encourage you to reach out to me during the week as well. I have a limited amount of time, but I do like to engage and do the best I can, or have one of the guys who surround me jump in as well and just offer their thoughts or their prayers as we go. So thanks for being with me again today. Love you guys very much. And until next week, God bless you guys. So grateful to have you as a community. Thanks.